Hello, welcome back to a video. This is actually going to be my first World of Warcraft video, and in this video I'm going to talk about some things you can do to try and maximize your gold output coming to the close of the expansion. We know Shadowlands will be released in Q4, and a lot of people can take advantage of some of the things that come with that. For example, people will no longer be raiding, so they're going to be looking for certain items that at the beginning of the expansion wouldn't have sold, as well, but some of the higher priced items like potions, augment runes, and so on and so forth are no longer selling as much because the majority of the community has completed the game to their satisfaction, and they're going to be working on gearing on alts or doing different things like leveling up professions or crafting certain items, things that are done now that are more passive and cosmetic as opposed to the hardcore grind. So basically what we're going to be doing in this video is, if you come over here to Kultiris, and you can do this as Horde or Alliance, there is the dungeon Freehold. Now in this dungeon it's very densely packed with mobs that drop quite a large amount of raw gold, as well as a lot of items that you can benefit and turn into sellable items. Now, in order for this to be very successful, you will need enchanting and tailoring. And what you're going to need for the tailoring is going to be the rank 3 of embroidered deep sea bag. You're going to need, at least at a minimum, to be able to make the tide spray pants. And you're going to want enchanting because in order to make the embroidered deep sea bag, you're going to need this particular conversion, which is the Aqueous Invocation, that's going to give us our Hydra cores from title cores. Now, title cores are very easy. You get them at the end of Mythic and Heroic dungeons. You should have plenty of these. If not, they are not hard to get while doing your normal grind to get your character gear or whatever the weekly dungeons are. Now, I find it important to note that in this video, this guide is more or less going to be for a more established player. It's going to be very in-depth, more than some of my fellow YouTubers' videos, in exactly how you're going to do this to min-max it. The caveat to everything is that you should be doing this on a Demon Hunter. Demon Hunters have the most sustainability, and it will allow you to complete the dungeon on average anywhere from 1.5 to 3 minutes faster, but it can be done on other classes. I specifically am running it on a Fire Mage, and there's a couple reasons for that we'll get into later in the video. If you are going to be running this and you want to run it efficiently, the reason I say is for more established players, is you will have to have some basic knowledge of mechanics due to certain mobs and certain abilities they have. But the overall reason, you're going to need anywhere from about a 450 to a 470 item level or higher. I'm at a 468, and during some of the larger pulls with this specific class, I do find myself in a little bit of trouble at times just due to the abilities that the mobs have. Now, a couple things that are going to be necessary in order to make this the most efficient, as possible, is going to be your Azurite essences. The big one going to be the essence of the Focusing Iris. As with most of the mobs in here, their health is actually less than the rank 3's full damage tick, and it will allow you to fully kill in one rotation of it, pending you do it properly. Now, this dungeon can be completed without it. Some downsides will be, obviously, your speed will be dramatically reduced, as every pull in here is based around a cooldown rotation to make things as efficient as possible when going through. Obviously, the other essences are going to be best for your choice. I use ones that are going to specifically help me as a Fire Mage. Obviously, Memory of Lucid Dreams being a big one. Melee classes, I would encourage you to run Purification Protocol due to the AoE effect it has and the healing it can do when it procs, especially at close range, as the enemies have to be within 8 yards to receive the damage. I personally use Conflict and Strife because the versatility gain increases my damage quite dramatically and allows me a little bit more sustainability, since I'm typically not going to be super close to the mobs if I can avoid it. The next thing you can do is you can use a respective flask. Now, the increase you get from this is not dramatic enough that I would suggest investing gold in order to make gold. I don't think it's quite necessary. When going through this dungeon, and you'll see it appear on your screen in a second, there's an established route that consists of anywhere from about 6 to 7 poles. This could be less or more depending on your class, gear, and comfortability level. The first pole you actually want to do is going to be right here up and to the left. Now, the mobs in here to take special note for are going to be the crack shots. The crack shots have an azurite grenade that will bounce your character, and the enforcers have a backhand that's going to knock your character back as well. Once all the mobs are dead, go ahead and take a second to loot. Now, in this particular video, just to showcase what I was doing in the polls, I actually did not pull these to the correct spot. Normally what you'll do is, without aggroing the Sky Captain, you would bring them over here to this tower for line of sight purposes so you can group up the crack shots a little bit easier. As well as, once they're all grouped up, if you need to mass stun or immobilize your targets, you can do it in one area to back off and avoid some of the backhands from the enforcers. Now, it's very important that you do not kill Sky Captain Craig. The reason being, once you kill him, a lot of these mobs down here will exit stage left and it'll be less loot. So once you have killed that group of mobs, you're going to run down here and begin the aggro process. If you accidentally aggro Sky Captain Craig like I did here, it's not a big deal. He has an incredibly short reset range. You just walk over here and finish killing your mobs and he will reset. So when we talk about cooldown management, you'll notice I used a rotation of 2 different cooldowns. I had to ice block because in order for the video, I did not showcase a proper pull and got into a little bit of danger. But obviously, if you need defensive cooldowns, use them as necessary due to wonky mechanics. But on the first pack, we used our Combustion as well as Rune of Power and some other abilities. For the second and more difficult pack, we used our Focus Azurite Beam in order to burn them down. Now, something of important note, besides the essences, there are certain Azurite traits that will make this more efficient. If we come into here, I have Vampiric Speed. So when an enemy you harm dies, you heal for basically 13,400 damage and gain speed for 6 seconds. This is an extremely important ability because when you're talking about grouping up anywhere from 9 to about 50 mobs, whenever they die, especially at a rapid speed, it's going to heal me in those dangerous situations. Would highly recommend this particular trait on at least one piece of gear in order to make this more efficient and increase your sustainability. Now, the next group of mobs we're going to pull is going to be this initial little circle right here. There is a Vermin Trapper pack that you want to try and pull, and I always try to bring them over here to these low-level neutral mobs to increase my gold per minute. So we had to use Ice Block again, and I'm going to use this as an example to talk about some of the more dangerous abilities. As you can see, though, I am at full health due to my Vampiric healing, but the Oarsman will cause a spray on the ground that will knock you up and cause some damage. This can interrupt your casting speed, but more importantly, the falling damage you take is not negatable, so you're going to take quite a large chunk of damage from that initial fall after they knock you up. The Vermin Trappers will lay traps on the ground, and during large pulls, they're actually incredibly hard to see. those traps are going to root you in place, so if you're a mobility class that's going to rely on heavy AoE at range, it's going to lock you to where you can't move, and that's actually what happened to me right there, and with so many mobs attacking me at once as a cloth wearer, it drops my health pretty quickly. One way to avoid that is going to be using any kind of immobilization, stun, or disorient in order to get your abilities off and have mobs start dying before the traps have you locked in place with all of them free beating on you. So we used our combustion on that pole. Now the next pole I always recommend doing, which is the harder of the poles in here, while you have your Azurite beam active, is actually going to be over here. So there are several very dangerous mobs you run into right there. We're going to actually start with the Knuckle Duster. The Knuckle Duster does a ability called Bellowing Howl, I believe is what it's called. If you are casting when that ability goes off, it's going to lock you out of whatever school of magic you are using. For melee classes, this is not as important. The Iron Tide Crusher will occasionally throw a boulder at your feet, stunning you for 2 seconds, which can be very, very deadly, especially if you have not had mobs begin to die, or your abilities ticking on the mobs, getting them close to death, and have anywhere between 9 and 50 of them beating on you. The Watercasters will actually do an AoE slow spell at range. When grouping up mobs, this can be kind of dangerous because you will no longer be able to outrun them while grouping them up. It's relatively easy to avoid if you have any enhanced movements, such as Blink or the Demon Hunter Dash, Rogue Sprint, whatever the case may be. And the Harpooners will frequently latch a chain onto you that will drag you back into the group, and the most annoying part of that is not actually the drag, it's going to be that it's going to face your character the wrong direction, so you will have to be cognizant and make sure you immediately flip around and continue running. So with that pull, obviously our Azurite beam would be down at this point in time. Now with our Azurite beam being down, we can't do a giant pull because it is our strongest ability. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over here and do just a slightly smaller pull and use your class cooldowns accordingly for this one. Now the reason we brought them over here, obviously, is to line of sight from the caster mobs. Doing that just makes grouping it up easier, as well as kiting once you're moving around this, because not all the mobs can necessarily chase you at the exact same time. They'll have to clip on the corner. So with our Azurite beam up again, what we can do, now this is a very small pull, but it's one that can be done very quickly. As you've thinned your way through the majority of the larger pulls in the instance, you don't necessarily have to manage your cooldowns quite as much because you're not typically going to be pulling 20 to 50 mobs anymore, as there's just physically not enough of them left. Something I like to do for this particular pull is there is going to be a Earthshaker. I don't know which mob does that, but they do slow you down. It's not a big deal because there's not a lot of them. But you're going to typically want to drag them over to this corner. And one of the reasons is there's these 3 neutral mobs here. And it may not seem like much, but when you're talking about min-maxing, that's going to allow you to get 3 extra mob kills from non-normal aggro mobs without doing anything extra, and actually making your life easier by kiting the mobs over there. Now, in the course of, let's say, 5 to 6 runs, if you can accomplish 5 to 6 runs within your hour time span or however long you're doing it, that can total up to be anywhere from about 10 to 20 extra kills throughout the instance, which is raw gold, Tide Spray Linen, so on and so forth, etc. It's just going to increase your gold per hour, and it's just something very easy and passive you can do while doing that pull. Oh, see that harpoon right there? It's just very unfortunate when they do that. It's quite annoying. If you're any type of mob that has any kind of AoE interrupt or long range interrupt, you're going to want to do that on this bilge water brine scaler. What that's going to do is drag him over to you, so all of your mobs are now grouped up in one place. Now your Azurite beam at this point is going to be up. You're going to come across this bridge to the final pole of the instance. Now over here, there's not very many dangerous enemies. The one things you want to watch out for are these storm callers, as because the area we're going to be in is rather small, there's not a good way to drag them all into one place. I typically like to use one of my silences just to drag that particular storm caller over. Immediately get out of this hut, because they will stand and do an AoE lightning effect typically, and you do not want to be standing in that, because even at a high level it's going to hurt quite bad comparatively to everything else, especially if you're a class like a melee. You know, you have lots of armor and different cooldowns to reduce damage, but the magical damage is typically going to hurt the most because you don't have a good way to mitigate that without having an active cooldown. Now when you're at this part of the instance, you should have in your equipment manager 2 different sets of gear, the gear you're using, and a naked slot. Equip your naked gear to avoid durability damage, especially because that can impact your gold quite a bit. One death can be as much as 70 to 80 gold. You're going to let Harlan Sweet kill you. Release. And you are now back at the front of the instance. Re-equip your gear. Apply any of your class buffs. Run out. Reset. Now, without doing a tutorial or trying to talk over as far as commentary goes, an average run on a geared class can be done anywhere from 8 to 10 minutes. Demon Hunters, especially with good gear, can sometimes be sub 7, allowing you to do this anywhere from 5 to 8 times, depending on your class, gear, and competency level, per hour. You could theoretically do them non-stop, because even with the best gear, unless you are doing sub 5-minute runs, you typically will not hit your instance cap within the hour, so you could run this non-stop or until your bags are full. Things you're going to be on the lookout for are going to be the Deep Sea Satin, the Tide Spray Linen. Now we started this with absolutely no gold. It was completely empty in our inventory. In just the raw gold looted from the mobs, we made 485. We received 310 Tide Spray Linen, 7 BOE greens, 27 Deep Sea Satin. So once you've completed your runs, you'll hop on your mammoth mount or go to the nearest vendor. You're going to get rid of all your junk items. Now for my junk items right there, I got approximately 50 to 60 gold. After several runs, you could get anywhere between 200 and 300 for your junk items, as well as whatever the modest repair cost was. Mine was 24 gold with no deaths. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to come over here to the scrapper, and you're going to put all of your BOE greens looted in said instance into the scrapping machine. So during our scrap, the items we received were Moonlight Ore, Coarse Leather, Bloodstained Bones, Expulsum, and Tide Spray Linen. The only reason we're going to scrap only the BOE greens looted in the instance is because the Tide Spray and everything else can be put to better use in terms of pure gold, and the greens in there are not worth vendoring for a couple reasons. One, Expulsum is going to be a large majority of the gold you're going to receive when doing this instance, as long as you're running tailoring and enchanting, as well as the money made from particularly the Bloodstained Bone, and the Moonlight Ore is going to be close to, and in some cases on some servers, depending on market value, maybe even more than the vendor price of the greens you'll get. Once this is done, you're going to want to make sure you immediately come into your tailoring, go up here to your embroidered deep weave satin. Obviously you can see I do not have enough nylon thread, so we're going to come over here, we're going to buy a stack of it, and we're going to go in and create our embroidered deep sea. Now the reason we do this first is because it does take 1 Tide Spray Linen per, and if we've already farmed it out, we don't want to create our other crafts and find ourselves with not enough to go ahead and do the embroidered deep sea satin later. Once it is complete, the next thing you're going to move down to is going to be crafting the Tide Spray linen pants. I ran out of my nylon, so I will buy more. I'm going to go ahead and craft the mittens as well, just to get rid of all of my Tide Spray. Once you do that, if you have your Traveler's Tundra Mammoth, or you're going to go to the nearest vendor, you're going to actually just sell all those for a direct gold profit. So you can see in the left-hand corner down here, those vendored for 700 gold approximately, or excuse me, 689 and 23 silver. Now, some of this is going to get cut into your profit margin because your nylon thread, if you are exalted with the Proudmoore Admiralty or the Zandalari respectively, it is going to cost you approximately 86 gold per stack of 200 to be taken out of your profits. That is a small amount, though, considering each individual pair of green pants vendor for 39 gold, and the blue versions that can come will vendor for 47 gold. You will absolutely make a dramatic profit, even with buying your nylon thread, as long as you are buying it from the Exalted faction at 48 silver per. Now, on your right-hand side, you're going to see a list I compiled after a full hour of farming that goes into great detail of everything I did. It will not reflect what you see here. It is a full hour of fresh farming. And we will go over that together now. So during this hour in farming, I received 2,888 gold and 33 silver of just raw loot. This is just gold that came off the mobs. For vendor trash, I received gray items and trash items for an equivalent of 174 gold and 10 silver. I received 1,805 units of Tide Spray linen, as well as 132 deep sea satins. After scrapping all of the green drops, I received 48 moonlight ore, 27 bloodstained bone, 14 coarse leather, and 10 expulsum, as well as 2 soul stones and an additional 33 Tide Spray linen. My cost input was 1,067 nylon thread, totaling 512 gold and 16 silver. One thing I always do to min-max is if I have certain materials after my farm that could be bought at the auction house at a reasonable price to get me one extra craft on a certain item. In this case, we're talking about the embroidered deep sea bags. I will go ahead and restock from the auction house. That was at the cost of 8 deep sea satin for 8 gold and 75 silver, 140 Tide Spray linen at 285 gold, and everything said and done, it can take approximately 1 hour additional time. So after you've moved down here, you're going to go to your crafted raw gold. This is not the auction house. This is the Tide Spray linen pants and the deep sea bags that we are making. With the linen I had left over out of the 1,805 plus the additional 140, I crafted 108 Tide Spray linen pants that vendored for 4,343 gold and 44 silver. I crafted 2 embroidered deep sea bags. This, of course, came from the 10 expulsum, which totaled about 2,900. This can vary depending on market value as well as your server. 2,900 per bag, totaling 5,800. Was actually a very, very good price for my server for that day. Some of the miscellaneous items that we talked about earlier that we're going to make up for the fact that we were scrapping and not selling the BOE greens are the bloodstained bones for 198 gold, 96 silver, the moonlight ore for 192 gold and 15 silver, the coarse leather for 11 gold and 2 silver, and even though that's a low amount, it's dramatically more than it vendors for, and the 2 soul stones for 16 gold. Under total calculations, everything said and done, minus the cost input, I received 12,802 gold and 27 silver. It took me approximately an hour and 45 minutes, but we'll round it up to the 2-hour mark. Divide that number by 2, I was averaging 6,401 and 13 silver gold per hour. Now this will vary depending on your drop chances. Obviously, if you get more BOE greens, you have the potential to make even a 3rd deep sea bag as well as your deep sea satin drops as well. Tide spray linen is incredibly regular. It will drop at a very good rate. You'll get anywhere between 1,500 and 2,000 always. Now, doing this 7 days a week will net you an average total of 89,615 gold. We'll round that up to 90,000. So for an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours every day, you can make 90,000 gold a week towards getting a Brutosaur mount or just stockpiling your gold for Shadowlands. This is purely a farm. This is something you do when you do not have dailies to do for gold, when you do not have any raid instances left for the week on any of your tunes, and when you don't feel like farming more RNG things like mounts, old world materials. One thing that I like about this is all the gold you see here is extremely reliable. Everything will sell, it will sell quickly, and it will sell for average values. This 6,000 gold will not change. It can go anywhere from about 6,000 to 8,000. So an incredibly reliable farm that doesn't take a tremendous amount of time, and it doesn't take a whole lot of skill, just a little bit of gear and the dedication to do it, as well as tailoring and enchanting. This is an extremely reliable farm. If you guys have any questions going forward, let me know. This channel is going to be officially doing World of Warcraft videos as well as Call of Duty to broaden myself to more gamers in the games I love and not one specific. Thank you all for your time, and peace out.